Hello, I am Ellis Dean, your host for BlackDoctor.org. Thank you for joining us for this community conversation in partnership with Cedars-Sinai. Our topic for tonight is inspiring the next generation of Black doctors, something near and dear to our hearts. We promise a conversation that will inspire you and the young people in your life. So bookmark this video now to share it with others. We have some great panelists joining us tonight. So let's meet them. First off, we have Ms. Nicole Mitchell. She is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Wellbeing at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. We also have Dr. Ronald Hurst. He is the Chief of Surgery at Cedars-Sinai Marina Del Rey. We have Dr. Zuri Morel. He is a colorectal surgeon and the Medical Director of Outreach and Quality Integration at Cedars-Sinai Cancer. He is also the chairman of the Physician DEI Task Force and at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And finally, we have Dr. Dale Okorodudu. Sorry, apologize for that tongue. I'm totally Southern tongue. Is the founder of Black Men in White Coats and the man behind the documentary film and podcast of the same name. And we also may have a special guest joining us a little bit later in the program. So a couple of things I need for you to do for me tonight. Number one is if you have any questions, drop that in the comments. We love to have your questions and we will answer them later on in the program. So please have your questions. Number two, if you know somebody that needs this information, please share this on your page, like this, share this on your page, or tag them. Let them know that we're having this conversation tonight. And please, please, please stay with us because this is information that we need because there is a dearth of people of color in medicine and we need to make sure that those numbers go up. So please, those are the three things I'm asking for you tonight. So please do that. And also let us know where you're watching from. We'd like to know where people are watching us from all over the world. So please drop your city and state in the comments. So we've got a lot to talk about today. So let's go ahead and get started. And let's start with you, Nicole. So Nicole, welcome. Let me say that first. Speak to you. So next month, Cedars-Sinai is hosting a special event for Black youth in Los Angeles. Tell us about the event and why you're involved.
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you and good to see everybody on the call tonight. It's fun to be around some of my friends, so this will be a fun conversation. The event is actually just a few weeks away. So on March 2nd, it's a Saturday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. to be exact. Not that we're counting down the days until we roll out the red carpet for our second annual Black Men in White Coats Youth Summit here in LA. So we're super excited to team up with Dr. Dale and his team to bring this back for a second time and really let's talk about how much this has grown. So last year we did this event for the first time in LA and it was a pilot. We had about maybe 100 people come through those doors. As of yesterday afternoon, we had 953 young people registered to join us. And I think that that is amazing and how I've really been looking at it. Yes, let's all give a round of applause for that because I think I'm looking at it as we're touching 953 futures, right? We're kind of really planting that seed and thinking about potential narratives in folks' journeys on a profession in healthcare. And it could be a physician, it could be a nurse, it could be an administrative person like myself. And I am so excited that Cedars is part of this journey and really seeing this grow here in Los Angeles. So I know we'll learn a little bit more about why the organization got started and about the summit when Dr. Dale talks. But, you know, for us, it's going to be a jam-packed day. It's going to be really exciting. We're going to have panels. We'll have a lot of hands-on interactive stations with over 50 Cedars-Sinai physicians, nurses, administrative folks there to interact and give back to that next generation of what I like to say healthcare heroes, because I know that's what these folks are. And that's super exciting for me. Potentially changing, let's just think of it as planting a seed and potentially changing the trajectory of some young people's lives. And this is for 6th through 12th graders. And it's going to be a really amazing day.
Well, it sounds amazing. Look, I hope I can be there. Maybe I
better come on out, Ellis. I'll save a spot for you for sure.
Make sure I get my plane ticket to Cedars-Sinai.
Cool.
So you know that it's a wonderful event, and I don't know. I wasn't great at math, but from 100 to 900, so I mean that's got to be What is that? Is that growth? Is that 9,000% growth or something?
Something like somebody that's stronger in math than me can calculate that. Big enough where we're having this event at the LA Convention Center in downtown Los Angeles, and it has grown so much that we had to find bigger space to accommodate, and maybe even bring in a DJ for a little bit of excitement and entertainment too.
Look, you said those are my two favorite letters, D and J. Okay, so we're gonna make that happen. So why is this important to Cedars-Sinai? Cedars-Sinai is a big brand. It's a well-known brand. It's a nationwide brand. Why is this work important to Cedars-Sinai?
Yeah, I think for us, it's critically important because part of our mission at Cedars-Sinai is really to educate tomorrow's physicians, nurses, and healthcare professions. That is literally one of the bullet points of our mission. And this partnership allows us to do that. And I think the other piece that is critically important for me is we believe that exposure and support are two ways to really nurture dreams of that next generation. And I think that this summit and those connections with potential mentors, opening doors and building bridges and kind of even building community amongst like-minded folks is going to help us create that next generation of healthcare heroes. And that's a big piece for us. I think that the other side of it too is diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, as well as education, are just part of our DNA at Cedars-Sinai. I mean, I lead the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and Wellbeing, and our team is leading a lot of the efforts because we want to change what the pathway looks like for potential folks to come into healthcare, and also show them that there's a million different ways that you can get into this work. And I think that is a big piece for us of exposure and just supporting that next generation in our community, right? We are here. Cedars-Sinai is a large footprint in the greater Los Angeles area, and we continue to grow, and we want to make sure we're giving back. And this is a great way for us to do that.
Well, you're right about that, and I would say that, and I don't want to step on Dr. Dale's brand on his parade, but I'm coming to you, Dr. Dale. But I just want to point out to our audience that's watching is that the percentage of Black doctors in this country has not grown since 1978. You think about that, and that is just under 50 years. Okay, so we're talking about 50 years, no percentage growth of Black doctors. And on the flip side of that, we understand that the data shows that patients of color, when they have a doctor that looks like them, that represents them, their outcomes improve. They get more preventative care, they are more adherent to care, and they have better outcomes. So you see that juxtaposition of what's happening in healthcare. And so that's why I'm coming to you now, Dr. Dale, when we're talking about what does that mean. Tell us about Black Men in White Coats and how your documentary film inspired the organization.
Yeah, wonderful. So first of all, let me say thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the audience, and I appreciate all the beautiful faces here, and you guys partner with Black Men in White Coats. So briefly, how Black Men in White Coats started. So it started in the year 2013. And what happened was Mark Neve, he was the chief diversity officer at the AAMC back then. He found he had to go give a talk at Howard University. And when he was giving the talk, he broke it down male to female, people going into the field of medicine. So what Dr. Neve actually found for this first report was less Black men applied to medical school in the year 2011 than they did in the year 2002. So that's the first report. That's a report that we saw. A couple years later, they put out this bigger report, which is the one that you just quoted, less Black men applied in 2015 or 2014 compared to 1978. So when we saw that first report, I just thought to myself, man, I don't have a solution, but I've got to do something about this. And what I did was pretty much I got my brother, I got a buddy, we were at Duke at the time. I said, hey, let's just film a video, put it online. Let's just talk about the issue just to make some noise about it. Well, that noise turned out into a lot of noise. And fast forward a little bit over 10 years later, we've got youth summits across the country with wonderful partners such as Cedars-Sinai. One thing that I did want to mention briefly, Nicole mentioned how we went from a little over 100 last year to about 1,000 this year, and it would be a lot more than 1,000. We have to slow the brakes on it. It's not just 953 lives we're touching. It's 953 lives exponentially multiplied by the lives that they'll be touching, right? So it's one thing to say, oh, this student might choose a career in medicine now because he showed up to the summit, and that is starting to happen. We're starting to see that now with some people who've attended summits in the past. However, just think about the lives that student will touch, whether or not they go into medicine. But let's say they do become a doctor. Let's say they do go back to the community, like you mentioned, right? Think about the lives they then touch. It's It's a beautiful thing. It's an amplifier. It's a multiplier. So we're not thinking about just that one individual. We're thinking about the community at large.
Boy, I'm sold. We can shut the show down right now, because you just sold us on what we need to be doing in this community, because you're right. It's about the lives that we're touching. It's about, because that one person could talk to their friends, and they've got their satellite of people around them. And so that 953, when you multiply it, and particularly now in the age of social media, each one of them could have 1,000 people following them. If they post about that, how many more people are they touching? That can be that seed of growth that inspires them, and they weren't even there, but they've got their friends saying, wow, I need to learn more about this.
Exactly.
So how do you do the work to increase the number of Black physicians? Because we were talking about that before we came on the show. That's why we started a little bit late, because we got into a great discussion, because we're all very passionate about it. But I think our audience need to know specifically, how is Black Men in White Coats, what is the work that y'all are doing increasing the number of Black physicians?
Certainly. Yeah. Thank you for that question. So we do a variety of things. Obviously, the biggest thing that people knows for right now are our youth summits. So the same way we're having this summit in LA, the goal is to plant these summits across the country, right? So we're from LA to New York. We've got, 20 plus summits, and I just hired somebody. So we're going to get summits even more across the country. And the idea there is exactly what Nicole said, is that initial exposure. You'll be surprised how many kids come to the summit and have never seen a Black doctor. Or maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but some people will be surprised. We've got kids who are like, oh, wow, there are people who look like me who are practicing medicine. So it's that initial exposure. After exposure, what we want to do is we want to equip them, right? So you expose them, then you equip them, you give them the resources, the tools, the connections. And in doing those two things, then we're empowering them. So exposure, equip, empowerment, right? That's kind of the strategy we use to make change long-term. So the summits do that. Obviously, other things we did, the documentary, we put out Black Men in White Coats documentary a few years ago. Amazing film, right? We had people, Hill Harper in there, Surgeon General Jerome Adams, Shane Battier. And that film was heavily based on this idea of exposure and bringing some of the brightest minds around this topic on screen together to talk it out and talk about what, not just a problem, but what we can do about the problem. That's one of the biggest things. Like, what are we doing about the problem? And obviously, we do various things in terms of trying to mentor the next generation as well.
All right.
Can I just say something about that documentary? Because Dale, we teamed up with you in 2021, 2020, something around then. And we brought the documentary to Cedars in our community here. And that was the spark for us. I mean, it was talking about the lack of representation, and it really got us going of what can we do? And then when the youth summit came up, it was, this is a no-brainer. This is absolutely what we need to be doing to help change the path and the exposure piece. So the documentary is awesome. And I think it was a great start for us at Cedars just to get this ball rolling a little bit more.
And if I just may chime in on that, Dale, one of the things I liked about the documentary is that it's not just about having, Black faces being doctors. What people don't understand is that when you deal with outcomes, is that there's something called implicit bias in medicine. Okay, so when we talk about outcomes being different versus having, a Black doctor versus for Black patients versus others, it's twofold. Number one is it's not necessarily because doctors are explicitly racist. I want to tell everybody who's listening to this, okay? Anytime it's our biases. So one example is that anytime the word poor is used in this country, media has shown poor, welfare, poverty, okay? 80%, 80% of the time a Black face is shown, okay? A Black face is shown. If you look at poverty in America, it's about 21% are African American. How does that affect even a doctor who is an other, who thinks that they're, trying to do the right thing for a patient, for instance? They'll see a patient and maybe the best test that you need is a CT scan. But because I'm a good doctor, I don't want to make you feel bad because you probably can't afford it, because I know that 80% of the poverty in this country is African American. So I'm not offering you that test, not because I'm racist, but because I'm trying to be that kind of doctor. I'm trying to care for you. This is how implicit bias can affect us as patients. And so it's important to know that when you have Black doctors, we're actually going to be saving people's lives. It's not just because it looks good. It's not just because we need to see us there for representation. It's because it can save lives. That's what's very important. Dr. Dale and I are trained on Caucasian patients. So sometimes I hear, well, should Black doctors only take care of Black patients and white doctors only take care of white patients? No, we're trained to take care of patients of all colors, but people are not trained to take care of us. And even when they're trying to do the right thing, because of implicit biases, because of these things, it can still end up hurting us. And I think that is really the key, you guys, is that, yes, I have some vested interests. Number one is because as an African-American male, I care. But number two is I need people to take care of me when I get old. I'm almost 50 years old now. Okay. So this is, to me, what I really want to harp on, you guys, is that it is incredibly important for actual patient care because people die as a result of not understanding us. We die. Black women don't get the medication that they need in the ER. Higher mortality death rate for African-American women giving birth. And it is significantly lower when you have an African-American doctor. I'm a colorectal surgeon. People don't even know that the age of screening is 45. Doctors don't. And this is when they changed that for African-Americans, they made it 45. African-American GI docs knew that. They've done studies on this. And so it is just important that we understand that it is actually a life-saving proposition to have African-American doctors, especially for African-American patients. And this is what I really wanted to hammer home today.
Look, yeah. I'm about to put your Cash App on the screen so we can pass the virtual plate around the room, because you're speaking my language right now, Doc, and you're absolutely right. We've got to hammer that home. And I just on a personal note, my mother had an incident where she got dizzy and lightheaded, and she tried to fight through it as like women typically do. I'm gonna be okay. Try to rub the chest, pat the chest, do whatever we do to get through it. But somebody stopped her. Black nurse stopped her and said, no, let's take your blood pressure. It's 200 over 140. So y'all know what those numbers mean. It was really, really high. And they got it down. They convinced her to go to the emergency room. But what I did was I went home and I went to her doctor's appointment with her. And we started having some conversations, some real conversations about what was happening. And thankfully, I've worked with blackdoctor.org and I work with a number of medical associations. And so I was able to have some real conversations with them. And so when you do that, you influence how that bias gets moved out of the way of how your loved one is being treated. And so now we're having some real conversations about their health and their healthcare. And so you touched on a great point there. Dr. Hurst, I see you. Come on in.
Yeah, I want to chime in on this because I think, what Zuri said is very significant amongst people of color. We as African-American providers understand the culture. We understand the language, and we understand what community means. It's not uncommon when I take care of cancer as well, primarily a lot of breast cancer, and seeing patients with breast cancer and women of color, I see the disease process decades ago presenting 15 years or 10 years younger than our Caucasian population. But when an African-American woman is seen by a non-Black physician, they're oftentimes dismissed as the disease, they're too young for the disease process. But knowing what the data shows, seeing the presentation of the disease in the community, seeing how prevalent and aggressive it is in young women, my approach is a lot different than what they were seeing in a non-Black physician. So it's not about being overly aggressive, it's about being appropriately aggressive.
Yes.
And speaking that language to them. And when you show that aspect to the patients and show how much you care, not just about doing the disease, but I'm talking about how to preserve your life for your family, for your children, that extended family. Well, that's the community I'm talking about. And Zuri touched on that when it comes to colorectal cancer. I resonate that with breast cancer because those two disease processes, along with prostate cancer, are taking out our people.
Yeah.
And I think this piece is so important to talk about, Ron. I do. And I just want to say one thing about it from an education perspective, why having these three at the table and this event, I mean, just to bring it back to that, because I think it's a good circle moment. These voices and these experiences and the things that they're seeing as Black physicians imparting that on that next generation, that's a game changer, right? Like we do a lot of unconscious or implicit bias education within Cedars because we know it is foundational. It's not the be all end all to fixing bias in medicine, but it is a foundational element of educating and making people aware. And then having folks talk about their personal experiences, just like Zuri and Ron did. And we're implanting that information with the youth. That's a really cool opportunity. And I think that's what Black Men and White Coats, particularly the Youth Summit, is allowing us to do and giving everyone the platform to talk about it.
Well, I'm so happy that Dale has found a way to be successful in doing that. Now, I'm probably about a decade older than most of these young doctors here. And back when I was in college, I had the same vision, but it was pre-social media. And being in LA and from Compton myself, I knew that there was a lack of representation of Black doctors. And I said, when I turn my age, there are not going to be very many Black doctors, because there used to be an organization called NAMI, National Association of Minority Medical Educators. And I wrote a paper when I was a Drew in college about what it's going to look like in my 60 years of practice, the six decades of me practicing. There are not going to be many that look like us. And I wrote a paper in reference to that, but I said it was because of gang war in LA, because they were losing so many young Black men at that time. But it's a lot more complicated than that now, and we're just not seeing it. And so I attempted to attach 5 schools within LA County, providing access to a university to get access to see people that look like themselves in biomedical research science, pre-med students, to get them on campus. I provided them free transportation. I provided them lunch and had all the professors there. And when I went to these different schools to encourage these students to come, you know what they asked me? How much money I was going to make, how long it was going to take to become a doctor. And the thing that resonated with me, and I said, well, time will pass regardless, doing something or doing nothing. So make sure you're doing something that's passionate, because the time will pass. And if you don't step on and do something now, you will lose these opportunities. So having this exposure and your ability to do these summits, Dale, is historical. And I applaud you for doing that.
Well, Dale is a pioneer, and that there's a word for that in the English language. It's called a pioneer. And so Dale is that. But I can tell just by his demeanor and talking to him a few times, he's so humble about what he's doing, because he's passionate about it, and it's about the work, and it's about reaching the students. So Nicole, in that frame, please let people know how they can reach and become a part of these events all over the country. So I know there's a way for them if they want to get involved in this, because I see we've got people already, that Floyd and Gail are already in the chat room. So let us know how we can get across.
And Nicole, can I just add one thing before you do that? I want everybody to hear what Nicole is saying. It is a slap in the face to Dale, to Ron, to myself, and Nicole, and Ellis, if you guys don't take advantage of these opportunities. Okay, meaning that there is always a lifeline. I've offered people coming to I go to high schools. I'll offer kids, hey, come to the surgery center, watch us operate. The truth is, a lot of my black belt students don't do it. Caucasians do it, right. Latinos are doing it, and and sisters are doing it. Okay, and that's great. But I need you guys to know the only way that we can feel disrespected, and you're disrespecting the dream of Dr. Dale and all of us here, is not taking advantage of these opportunities. Okay, so it's very important. So I just want everybody to listen to Nicole and Nicole, go for it. But it's important that we take advantage of this, because all of us are doing this out of love. But please take advantage of what she's about to tell you.
Yeah, and I'm going to tag in Dale too, because I think following Dale on Instagram and Twitter and everything is a good resource. But I mean, keep up with the Cedars-Sinai social media accounts as well, because I think it's going to be a great way where we will highlight what we're doing for the LA Summit on March 2nd. But I know blackmenandwhitecoats.org/summit, that website, and I think there'll probably be a link that goes up on the screen or in the chat, is an amazing way to see, as Dale mentioned, all of the summits that are happening across the country. So we know people are tuning in from everywhere. We're specifically talking about what's happening at the LA Summit on March 2nd, but there are summits all over the place, and this is growing, and it's super exciting. So we hope, to Zuri's point, we spread the word, take advantage of these opportunities all over the country and dive in, because it's a really amazing opportunity that I think we all wish we had when we were young, and thank goodness for Dale for creating this.
I want to jump in real fast, and I get everybody saying thank you, Dale, thank you, Dale, thank you, Dale. But it's important to recognize it's not just Dale. To the point that everybody's making. These things are really team efforts. First of all, I've got the people on my team, right, who work directly with me, Trisha, Danielle, Cherie, etc. And then you got the people, Dr. Hirsch, you were mentioning. You guys are generations before, so that's one thing that even though I'm a doctor, so I finished med school in 2010. Right, it's important that I acknowledge the people in front of me. Right, it's important that all of us acknowledge people in front of us who paved that way. Because even though there's not very few of us there, without having the people in front of us, we wouldn't have made it. Right, so that's important. Having these communities, these conversations, these things are critical. So the few numbers we have, I know a lot of times we're kind of like, man, it stinks. Only 2%, 3%, less than 5%, but we're down about those numbers. But at the same time, I think we should take some pride and be happy with what we do have. And because the one thing that I will say is there's not many of us, but we are a community. Like we are a community. We do support each other in the medical field, and we need to be saying thank you to that. So thank you to the Dr. Hurst, to the Dr. Morels, Dr. Cedric Brides, right? All these people across the country Quinn Capers, Brian Cry, all these people who have been kind of leading the way for quite some time. And
I think I just do one more shout out too, because the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and Wellbeing team at Cedars-Sinai has been working so hard to make this thing happen. And I just want to do a quick shout out to them because Dale, you're right. It's a team effort. And our 50 plus folks that are volunteering their time just to make it go smooth. March 2nd, it's a huge undertaking there. And then my team behind the scenes is working like crazy to make this happen. So it is. We stand on everyone's shoulders and we're super excited. I can't wait to see everybody.
Let me add, I know we're going to transition. Let me add one more thought that I thought about when Dr. Morel was speaking earlier about representation. So you talk about us having to be there for the patients, to speak on behalf of the patients, and those things are very important. But also the idea, the implicit bias and all those things, is the idea that we have to be there for our colleagues as well, right? Because our colleagues learn from us being present in the room. And that's something that I think is often overlooked. It's well known, but it's something that I think doesn't come to mind. First of all, as a physician practicing academic medicine, one thing you have to do these grand rounds, these talks in front of everybody. And when my grand round comes up, when my talks come up, I don't really want to do things pertinent to race, right? I'm like, man, I want to do something that has nothing to do with being Black. But then, one year I went through and I looked at all the grand rounds reports for like the past 10 years, and there were only three topics to cover diversity. And I was like, man, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And the three topics were done by minorities, right? URMs. So like, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? So that's another reason we have to keep in mind this idea of representation. It's not just take care of the patients, but it's to educate our colleagues as well.
Dr. Morel, you stepped off on it. You took us off on a whole another place, because I started thinking about those conditions that are disproportionately impact our community, like sickle cell, right? But you think about how many Black hematologists are out there, right? That are treating this, how many Black pediatricians, and so understanding what sickle cell patients have to deal with in terms of bias when they're presenting, having an event, right? But somebody that's Black, a doctor seeing them, will had that empathy because they understand, because it's impacting. They know somebody that has sickle cell, so they can say, "Oh, look, when they're having a pain crisis, it's real. It's not medication seeking," which is a lot of sickle cell patients get labeled. So I'm getting off my soapbox. I'm sorry, I'm getting off my soapbox. So, but I want to talk to you all about mentorship, right? Because I think that's what you were touching on earlier, Dr. Morel. You're talking about how we're doing it. Dr. Dale, that's what you're doing when you're doing these projects. You're basically showing them mentors, and that might be secondary, tertiary through social media, but you're giving them a mentor that says, "Hey, that's somebody I can be like that person." So, how important is mentorship to you all, and how do you incorporate it into the work that you're doing right now?
Well, if I can go, there's a Dr. Randy Edmonds who I still have a picture of. And so my parents were social workers. I'm the first doc. My dad and family's from Compton also. I'm the first doctor in my family. And this was a pediatrician who was my dad's friend, happened to be my dad's friend. So he would come over to the house. My dad used to, my dad and my mom were the only ones who had kids out of their social group. So, you know, they'd come over, he had a lot of friends come over, and Dr. Edmond would always just spend time with me. He's a pediatrician. He taught me how to listen to a heart exam and do all these other things. And it was just neat having somebody there who, you know, would talk to me, and he's a doctor. I subconsciously was like, this is what I want to do. And I know I can do it because he did it. And every day, the rarity of what we're doing hits me, because I'll see some of the environmental services workers at the hospital, and they're like, hey, doc, thanks for saying hi. You're one of the first Black doctors I've met. These are like 50, 60, 60-year-old people. Okay. And this is still a thing where a lot of people have a ton of doctors in their family. Okay. And it really does. It's not a big deal for them to become a doctor. They're surrounded by doctors. But the reason mentorship is so important to me is that I have to remind myself that a lot of us don't interact. Like, they'll see a Black doctor maybe, just in passing. But I think it's that interaction that is so important. And I get a lot more from it than I think the mentee gets, because it's so fun to teach somebody something new, to see gleam in somebody's eyes, and to make somebody excited. And actually, I get more excited about those kind of things than I do sometimes about operating. It's actually seeing kids, whether, no matter what race, but especially us, because a lot of times when I deal with us, I'm the first doctor they've actually spoken to, let alone had a medical kind of consult with. And so it invigorates me. I mean, I go to Africa, I go to Uganda and do a lot of like medical mission work and all those things. And I love it. But mentoring here is something, because it's funny, in Uganda, they see Black doctors. I mean, like the doctors they see is interesting, because, Black pilots, Black doctors, like they actually see Black doctors there. Here, it's interesting because you don't see as many here, or some of the students I deal with, and I live in Los Angeles, right? And so it's really it's such a fantastic experience. And then, like I said before, they're also going to be the ones to take care of me, and so it's important for a whole lot of reasons. But I was blessed to have mentors in my life that I didn't even realize were mentors, and I want to make sure that people have that opportunity, whether they see me on social media, or what I really love is a one-on-one kind of interaction. And it's just the only way I really think that people can make change, is that you got to see it to believe you can do it.
Dr. Hurst, talk about your experience. Did you have a mentor growing up to help you get to where you were? And if you did, who was that person? And then are you mentoring folks to pay it forward now?
So I'm going to start this a little differently. When I was coming up through become a physician, there was no mentor for me. I actually had to be, because I knew exactly what I wanted to be before I was even 8 years of age. I literally planned out my whole career path by myself. There was no doctor in my family. It was put upon my spirit to be to be a physician. Didn't know what type of physician I was going to be, but I knew that's what I'm going to say what the Lord had put upon my heart to do. And I had to go out and find mentors for myself. And that's what I did. And actually my very first person that I latched onto to be a mentor was not a physician. She was an educator. And because she was educating young Black students, she was at Drew at the time, and she created a program that would attract young Black students to enter into the field of medicine. And I linked on to her. That was my second mentee. My first mentee was when I was in high school, who I met accidentally. And he was a middle school teacher at Fauché Junior High School. And he came to watch me present a science project for LA County Science Fair. And he said, you were one of only 2 Black students present. And what he saw, what I presented, he was very impressed with, and asked me if I would come back and mentee his 7th and 8th graders. And that's how my life evolved around mentoring young people, because it started when I was in high school. So it became a natural part of who I am genetically and spiritually to navigate that process. So now I fight to be a mentor for other students. I have friends whose children who want to be doctors. I say, come on to my clinics, come on to my rotations, spend a month or two with me during the summers. I have students coming from the East Coast that come and rotate with me, and they're young African men, women, not men, unfortunately. But I tell them, do not be discouraged by it, because the journey, I'm sure each one of us journey is met with some degree of obstacle along the way, some fashion. And where it's emotionally, physically, spiritually, something was an obstacle. But with the passion and the drive for what you desire, there's nothing that can stop you. Because I even had a African American counselor tell me as a freshman that I cannot and should not be a physician. I should go into trade. And I will not mention the university, and I will not mention the gentleman's name, because guess what? That same experience is what motivates me every day to be the best, to be the best for everyone around me, for what I do, best for my colleagues, best for my family, best for my patients, because no one can tell you what you cannot do. But if you desire and are passionate about it, you will find the way with the right support system, with mentorship. So that's why I'm so passionate about mentoring for young African American students, to show them there's the way through.
I love it. So I'm going to do a brief kind of housekeeping thing. Number one, I want to say, hey, you're watching Community Conversations on Charting Success, Inspiring Black Youth in Medicine. And we're having a riveting conversation. We have gotten way off the rails of our conversation, but this is what we are here to talk about. So Nicole, I know you got to go. You got other things you need to do. So we're going to let Nicole go, and we're going to bring in our final guest. Thank you, Nicole. And that is Dr. Rubisi Owanda. He's the youngest. He's the newbie of the crew. He's an orthopedic surgery resident at Cedars-Sinai. So he is fresh out of medical school. And so we're going to welcome him. Welcome, Dr. Owanda. Thank you for joining us. I know you're busy. You had other things you needed to do before you got here, but we're happy you've got the time with you tonight. So welcome, and thank you for joining this important conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So my question for you is, especially as somebody that is the youngest person on this panel, the person that has just come out of medical school, you're starting your residency, what's the best advice that you would give to a young Black student who's thinking about being a doctor, especially if they feel challenged in their STEM classes or feel that they're being discriminated against or discouraged from pursuing a career in medicine?
I think that as you kind of start out, when you get into STEM, the first couple classes when you're in college, especially, and even in high school, I would say if you're thinking about being a doctor, check it out in high school and try some of the STEM classes. And if you find them hard, there's always somebody who's willing to help. There are office hours. There are opportunities that you can go and seek out. I know I went to office hours when I was starting in chemistry because, stuff's kind of hard sometimes. And then after a while, you get the hang of it. I think that what you guys were talking about with the mentorship is really big. And I think that starting like early high school, maybe even middle school, like you were mentioning, is big. And the fact, Dr. Hurst, that you were able to figure that out so early is phenomenal. I think it was a lot later in my own journey that I figured out mentorship was kind of the way forward. I actually did a master's program between undergrad and medical school. And that was when I really learned about mentorship. And I think that really kind of catapulted me to the next level to say, okay, you know what, I can do this. I can study and get better scores on my tests. I can elevate myself to that next level and then get through medical school. And then after I got into medical school, it really became about the mentorship really took hold there. And and it takes a village to raise a child. I reached out to many people and cold emails, cold calls, because people want to help, but sometimes they don't even know they want to help. And there's nothing wrong with finding somebody, anybody that you think their work is fantastic, or you think that what they have achieved, you'd like to try and achieve. And if they got there, even if they got there by blind, dumb luck, they can look backwards and say, okay, this is the thing that actually got me through this. I didn't realize at the time, but this got me to that next step. And I think that's probably the most important thing. And I think also giving yourself a little grace, because you're going to stumble on the way. You know, you're going to have a bad test one day, or you're going to, you know, you studied super hard and you were crushing your SATs or your step practice exams. And then you get on the day of the test and, you know, whatever happened, you slipped and you missed that mark you were after. But that you can't let that discourage you, because everybody's going to fall down. And the people who don't fall down are the ones you got to watch out for, because they don't know what it's like to fail. Mm-hmm. And then when they do finally fail, it might break them.
Mm-hmm. It's never a loss if you learn from it, right? Jay-Z line.
I love it. I love that. And I'm going to sum it up this way for those like me that are simple and like simple phrases. You got to get over the perception of perfection. Okay, we've got to get beyond that, because I'm telling you, everybody on this panel, I'm sure, has had some failures in their life. And so when you see MD after these names, you see doctor on the front side, their life has been great, their life has been perfect. It's like, no, they've had some challenges. And so you have to talk to them. You have to really get over that image of that perception of perfection, to really talk to them, and they'll tell you, and that'll be encouraging to know, hey, they've had failures, they've had stomach blocks in their life, but they were able to overcome them and get to where they are. Dr. Dale, we're going to come back to you. We're going to talk about advice for parents, because I know you've been doing this for a number of years now. And when we're talking about students, we know, and you all know, everybody on this panel knows, you didn't get to success by yourself. Maybe Dr. Hurst, because your story is inspiring of its own. But what role and what advice would you give to parents if you know you've got a child that is gifted, that is showing some signs of being good in science and math and those STEM courses? What advice you give them so they can cultivate that love and move them to that space where they can get into healthcare, maybe become a physician one day?
Yeah, sure. So I think you hit the nail on the head for the very first thing. The first thing is pay attention, right? You want to pay attention to see, what is your child good at? What are your child's interests? I like to say, what are your child's gifts, right? So pay attention to those. And once you know those, you really want to foster them, okay? Two things I always try to tell patients. Number one is, it's okay to suggest medicine as a career for your child. Some people are like, I don't want to push it on my child. You don't have to push it, but it's okay to suggest. If you think the career is good, suggest it to your child. Bring them to, whatever, summits, doctors, whatever, right? Expose them to medicine. That's the first thing. And the second thing, which I think my parents did a phenomenal job at, was study the pathway for your child ahead of time. You want to be your child. Sure, there's mentors out there, there's counselors, there's coaches, there are advisors. Those people are out there, but you want to be your child's number one resource if possible. So what does that mean? I think back to when we were in high school, right before the internet and things of that sort. My parents would go to the library, or they'd go to bookstores, and they would buy these thick books that had all the colleges in it. I remember, I can imagine, seeing my parents in the living room on a weekend, just sifting through this books with all the college information, the SAT scores, right? Where to school, tuition, just sifting through all that stuff. What classes you have to take, and they were doing all the research for us ahead of time, because sure, we could have done it, but at the same time, we were kids, we didn't quite know. So they did all the research, and when we had questions, we could go to them, and if they didn't have the answer, they do their best to try to figure something out. So that's probably the number one bit of advice that I give parents. If you know your child wants to do something, first of all, put them in that environment, but second of all, to the best of your ability, do the research for them ahead of time, so you can be a resource for them as long as possible.
And that's a wonderful answer, because you're absolutely right, because that's who they're going to be looking to first, assuming. And I think we brought up something earlier in this program, and I want to kind of touch on this, because especially as all of us being Black men, and we understand the culture, right? And so we're speaking to Black people. So the culture is almost like swimming upstream sometimes when we're talking about studying in school, getting good grades, because there is this erroneous kind of assumption that when you say, hey, I'm trying to get all A's, I'm trying to get the best grades that I can, I'm trying to get the highest SAT scores, those types of behaviors are associated with being outside of the culture, right?
Well,
and so
that's what my point was, is that know your kids' friends.
And how do we overcome those perceptions? How do we overcome, especially when you're hearing, and we were touching on it earlier, talking about how, when Dr. Hurst was talking about, well, how long is it going to take, right? And you're saying, well, how much money are you going to make? Quick dollars is it's pushed upon us. It's coming. It's in our society, getting money fast, getting money easy and fast versus that delayed response of, hey, medical school, I got to get through undergrad. I got to get to medical school. I got to go through my residency. That's delayed gratification on becoming a doctor. How do we teach those kids to say, I've got to push out what I'm getting from society to be able to focus on and get through medical school?
Ellis, one of the things I was going to say is that parents knowing their kids' friends. Also, that's really one of the most important things. A lot of times we think, I have two daughters, 16 and 17 and 15, and it annoys them. But in this day and age, everybody communicates on text, but I have to meet their friends. And they're great kids, because that is, I mean, the truth is that kids are, and their studies, I think the 5 people that they interact with the most are going to have the biggest impact on their life. So those are sometimes, parents, but to be honest, most of the time it's friends. And I think that friend group is incredibly important for multiple reasons. For support is number one. Is that is, and also you want to have like-minded individuals. We talk about kids wanting, to get money fast, things of that nature. I mean, it's something that I fought for a long time when I talk to kids, but I'll talk to them about what a great lifestyle that I have, and you don't have to worry about, you get to make your money by helping people, the delayed gratification, all those things. But no matter what I say, if their friends are the ones trying to get money fast, then, that's ultimately who is going to have the biggest kind of impact. So parents, don't be afraid to, have them over, feed them, just see what these people are about, because that is going to be one of the biggest things you can do is, and if you don't like their friends, try to involve them in a different, in other organizations where they can meet people who you think are similar or who have goals. My parents always made me hang out with people who they thought were better. When I say better than me, I mean, who were high achievers, I was always not the dumbest person in my group, but I was always the one who I had the most to learn from the group I was hanging out with. And that made me want to be better organically. And I think that that's something that's often overlooked is your social circle has more impact than you do as parents. And then number 2 is that parents who are on this call is always preaching to the choir. Because right now, parents, you're doing it. Like, being on this is already doing what Dr. Dale is saying. So one thing you could do is share what you're learning with other people who are not on this call, because that's really the key. And so that's my 2 cents about what parents can actually do to help foster achievement in their children.
And actually, there's actually some studies that shows actually not even just the friends, but it's the parents of the friends. So the parents of your friends it's a high predictor of what your future income success will be. That's one thing I wanted to mention. And something else slipped my mind, but it'll come back to me in a second.
My mother used to say all the time when I was growing up, she said, Ellis, water seeks its own level. Right. And so what the people that you associate with, you're going to be associated with them, whether you're not like them or not, you're going to be associated with that. And so she said, how do you see yourself? And so we've got to instill a self-esteem in our children from birth that says, I deserve better. I'm going to be better. And even if your parents are successful, you should be striving to be more successful than them. And so if you want more, then you've got to seek that level. If you're going to walk among giants, then you've got to increase your stride. Yeah. And so we've got to make sure that when we're doing those things, we're not shortening ourselves. We're not limiting our ability, and we're not seeking that lower level because we don't want to push ourselves and we don't want to challenge ourselves. We have to take those challenges.
And success is not money. That's what I always tell kids, that success is, in my opinion, is freedom. Freedom to be able to do the things that you want to do without, like as a doc, for instance, my freedom is we're always beholden to patients, but I never wanted to be beholden to insurance companies or, health system, things of that nature. But I think success is, we often just think it's spending money, making money, things of that nature. And it's really, in my opinion, helping people, but also the freedom to do what I want to do when I want to do it. Now you have to remember, you're not always free to do everything at one particular time. Freedom is gradual. But to me, I think that redefining what success is, I think is something that's That is important.
Well, freedom is earned, right? And so the more successful you are, the more freedom you have. That's what I tell my children. Like, the more successful you are, the more opportunities you have available to you, and the more freedom you have.
That's freedom, right?
If you're not successful, if you're not doing what you need to do in school, if you're not doing what you need to do in life, your life is going to become really restricted. You're going to have a restriction placed on your life, whether it's jail if you're trying to make some quick money, or just having to work 2 and 3 jobs just to meet inflation. So you have to work hard to be successful in order to get those freedoms that you say that you want, right? So there's going to be there's a price for freedom, and sometimes that is those 8 to 12 years of schooling to get to that freedom, and then you get the additional satisfaction of serving your community on top of that. So I think we're going to bring Nicole Mitchell back, because we want to make sure that Dr. Dale and we're talking about Black men in white coats, because this conversation, we can have a part 2 of this right now. So Nicole, I'm going to speak it into existence. We need to have a part 2 of this conversation, because it's so important for us. And I've really been enjoying this, not only just from an informational purpose for our audience, but from a personal standpoint, because I understand that what each of these men on this panel have done to get to where they are, and we can't look at them as saying they're different than what we are. They're part of our community, and they're heroes in our community, and we have to learn from them to say we can create more heroes like these 4 men on this panel right now. We can create more heroes like them if we do the work in our community by exposing our children to them so they can have mentors like these men. So I'm gonna give them the flowers now. So Nicole, please let them know how they can get involved in Black Men in White Coats. And I'm gonna put Dr. Morell, I have your social media, so I'm gonna put that on screen if you don't mind, so people can follow you and get more information from you. And if you have Dr. Abisi, Dr. Dale, all of your social, put it in the comments, put that in the chat so I can put that on screen so people can get in contact with you.
I'm gonna actually let Dr. Dale talk about how to get involved. So I'm gonna bump this one over to him.
Excellent. So the website that you want to go to, we have blackmeninwhitecoats.org, but then websites pertaining to the summits is actually bmwcevents.com, bmwcevents.com. And on that website there, you'll be able to see our summits across the country and things of that sort, to get plugged in and join our email list, etc.
And I think, again, as I said earlier, make sure you follow the Cedars-Sinai social media handles at Cedars-Sinai on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter, because I think we'll be highlighting not only what some of our amazing physicians that you see on the screen are doing, but we'll definitely be highlighting some stuff from the event as well.
And then one other thing, Dr. Ellis, and this is something I talked to Nicole about, I think it's important to tell all the kids that just because it hasn't been done does not mean it cannot be done. All of us here, there are going to be, no matter what we say, there are going to be people in your life who are going to tell you you can't. And some of these people will look like you. And this is when it's important to glean on to events like this, and find people who are willing to help you, because you can, it is without the challenges, to me, things aren't worth it. All of us can look at things that we went through and we thought that maybe we couldn't do this. But I look at those things now, like Dr. Hurst does, is that I've learned so much more from my failures. And I'm so much more motivated than my successes. And if it was easy, everybody would do it. Everybody would do it. And it's it makes success sweeter when you know you had to overcome things. And I would argue that if you didn't have to overcome anything, you wouldn't be as good. I'm a good doctor to this day because of the things I had to go through, where I had people tell me I wasn't. So just remember that things that you think are traumatic now, things that you think you won't get through, getting through those things will make you a better man, a better woman, and will make success even sweeter than if you never went through them.
Y'all speaking my language right now. So I'm just going to reiterate. So I'm trying to put these everybody's handles on screen. So producer, if you could grab those from the studio chat and put their handles on it, because I want these brothers, I want to see an explosion. So I want y'all to go follow them tonight, right? I want them to pull up their social media tomorrow and be like, wow, I almost doubled my followers in one night, because you're sharing this with your friends, because we share so many things on social media, right? And I'm getting back on my soapbox, so Danielle, I'm sorry. We share so many things on social media that's frivolous, right? I know how many seconds Taylor Swift was shown during the Super Bowl. Why do I know that? Okay, I know that, but we don't know what's a good blood pressure. We don't know what your cholesterol level should be under, what your number should be under. Those are the things we should be sharing amongst our community, because as we can see across the nation, they are trying to lower the amount of information that we get about ourselves. So we're going to have to go find it. And we have men on this panel tonight that are dedicated not only to their craft as surgeons, as chief of staff, as dedicated fathers in the community, to go out there and do it. And so they've set the blueprint. We've got to follow it. And we've got Nicole and Cedars-Sinai. We've got organizations that make millions of dollars that are willing to put their time, energy, and effort into supporting organizations like Dr. Dale of what's going on. And so please, 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 they're not doing it just for themselves or for a dollar. They're doing this because they understand the importance of serving the community. And so we've got to give them the respect for that. We've heard that word tonight. We've got to give them the respect for that. And we've got to get the men that came on this program tonight, gave up an hour of their time. Because I'm going to tell you, I know what an hour of a doctor's time, especially a surgeon's time, costs. All right. So for them to come in here and give us an hour, it is fantastic. So please go to these, and we're going to try to put those in the comments as well, these links, info@cedarsinai.org/community conversations. For all of our community conversations, please go to Black Men and White Coats, find out this information. Dr. Ribisi, Dr. Hurst, they've got wonderful stories to tell. You know, like Biggie Smalls, you say, I've got a story to tell. It's a great song, but these men got great careers, and they've got stories to tell about how they got to where they were. And they can help your children get to that next level. So if you're on LinkedIn too, go to LinkedIn too. We know LinkedIn, but for the young folks, we know you're on TikTok, and we know the Dr. Burrell, he's on TikTok too. So we gonna go where you're at. Okay.
No dancing. No dancing. Just education, just information.
Now you have to do one of the dance TikToks, sir.
I know.
The people have spoken.
We're going to do an I'm a Black Doctor. So, of course, we're going to do one of those, and we're going to do the pointing TikTok. So, please, I just want to thank our partners as we're wrapping up here. And if you all, and I want to thank everybody that's been active in the chat. There was some, in the comments, there was some, I want to acknowledge there was a brother that posted about his daughter being in her third year medical school. And I want to give him a shout out because he poured into his child. You know, she didn't get there by herself. She poured into her child. And one last thing I do want to say, that when your child gets to medical school and through medical school, you still have to wrap your arms around them, because Black doctors are disproportionately pushed out of their residency programs. And that's a fact that we have to address as well. When we're talking about disparities, that is another disparity that is not talked about in many spaces. Because when you think, hey, I got my MD, I'm in my residency program, I'm good. Not necessarily. And the tragic thing can happen is to have an MD and not being able to practice because you have been removed from your residency program for something very, very trivial, very, very minor. So when we're doing that, when we're talking about getting into, we got to get through, and we've got to get through that residency program as well. And we need that village to make it happen. So Cedars-Sinai is helping create a village. Dr. Dale, Black Men and White Coats, is creating a village. Dr. Zuri is creating a village in his social media. He's creating a village. Dr. Ribisi is being a village right now because he is standing out there as a resident in orthopedic surgery. And Dr. Hurst is he is a village among himself because he's now a chief of staff. So we've got everybody along the way represented on this panel. And I'm just honored for Cedars-Sinai to trust me with hosting this panel. Thank you, all of our friends over at Cedars-Sinai. Thank you, Nicole, again for just everything that you're doing there at Cedars-Sinai. We need you there, sister. We need you there to what you're doing. And thank everybody in the audience that stayed here. Pour into your children, pour into your community, give back. If you don't have a child, there's plenty of places and plenty of children that you can pour into, whether it's your church, whether it's your local Boys and Girls Club, school, after school programs. There are ways to pour into those children. And if you're a child watching this, I'm going to look directly into the camera. If you're a child watching this, as Dr. Hurst told you in his testimony tonight, do not let anybody tell you no. If you want to be a doctor, you can be a doctor. Your future is in your control, not in somebody else's. So do it in spite of. Let that spite be your motivator. Let them say, oh, you told me, let me show you. I can show you better than I can tell you. That's what I used to tell people. I can show you better than I can tell you. Be that person. Do not let somebody tell you no. And those are my words tonight. As we're wrapping up here, I know we're over our time, but look, y'all gonna have to slap my hand because this is a great conversation. So as we're wrapping up, I want to give everybody a final word. We're gonna go ladies first. And I know we're gonna go ladies first. We'll start with you, Nicole.
Thanks. Thank you, Ellis, for coming and moderating this. It's good to see you back. And Zuri, Dale, Ron, and Rabisi, thank you for being here. I think for me, make sure we've talked about the importance of mentorship and sponsorship, and take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. Black Men in White Coats Youth Summit is one of many, but a really important one. So I hope those of you who may have registered this year to see you on March 2nd.
Dr. Zuri.
Oh, I just thank you so much. And just once again, you guys, you get one life. You get one life, and who you are now is not necessarily who you are going to be in the future. So you want to give yourself every option. You want to make sure that you close no doors along the journey. And that's the biggest thing, is that you may not end up being a doctor, but if you would try to achieve that, you will end up doing something even greater. But just, really try not to close any doors, and try to look for others who you want to be, and I really do think that makes all the difference. Is you can find a mentor. All you have to do is look around you, whether that's somebody who just works hard. They may not be a doctor and you want to be a doctor, but that same hard work that they put into whatever they do can translate. And really, mentors are all around you. Dr.
Rabisi.
I kind of wanted to piggyback off what Dr. Morell said about kind of staying the course. And, we were talked about quick money, right, earlier. I think one thing that somebody could take away from this, no matter the age, is just kind of keeping in mind that you don't have to be the best in the world. You just have to be the guy who doesn't quit at the end of the day, because if you just keep walking, you will eventually get where you're going to go. It might take longer than some other people. You might need to go to grad school, or you might need to do whatever you need to do, but you just keep walking one foot in front of the other. Eventually you will get through the day. You will get through the SICU rotation. You will get through everything that
organic you have. Chemistry. I know about organic chemistry. I've heard about it.
Yeah. And just and have fun along the way. I think that's something that a lot of people might get turned off from when they hear about how hard things can be. Yeah, things are hard, but that's not to say that you can't have fun while you're doing them. And some of the friends that you'll make along the way will be the best that you'll have in your entire life. I know that some of the people I met in residency last year and this year have been, probably people I'll talk to when I'm 65, 85. Not only professionally, but also just because we're good friends. But yeah, have fun and good luck, everyone. And if you have any questions or need any help, reach out and I'm happy to work with you. Just shoot me an email or send me a message on Instagram.
Let's stick with Instagram, because you don't want them many emails. I'm telling you, Dr. Stick to Instagram. We'll go with Dr. Hurst. Final words.
Well, listen, I thank you opportunity again to be here. It's always a pleasure to be in the presence of Black greatness, and I think we cannot resonate that enough. One important thing I want to say is that the journey to becoming a physician is not a straight line, and everyone's course is different. So you cannot look at an equation and say, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and that path. Just because you do not take the path of someone else, does that mean you cannot get to the end point? That's the first thing. The second thing is always remain steadfast. I tell my children this, and they're almost adults now. And I define steadfast, which is biblical, but I tell it's patience with grace. You have to be patient with your journey, and you have to remain graceful in that journey. And finally, stay humble, because when you get there, you're going to impact people and they're going to see you. And you want to be humbled, so they want to be like you, to say this guy or this woman is a phenomenal Black person, and that MD behind their name does not define who they are. It is the man and woman before the MD who defines who they are. And that's how you want to set your life going forward in any field along with medicine. Thank you.
And we're going to close the show out with Dr. Dale.
Yeah, so I'll keep it short and sweet and just say thank you guys for allowing me to be on the panel. Thank you to everybody who's watching. And, my last simple bit of advice is ask for help. We're here to help you. Everybody's on this panel because we're here to help you. We are a resource for you. We're here for you. So best thing you can do for yourself is ask for help, and asking shall be given to you.
Well, those are some great words of advice from everybody. So I want to say again, thank you so much to our partners from Cedars-Sinai for this informative discussion. You can learn more about Cedars-Sinai community events and updates at info.cedarsinai.org/community conversations. If any young people are watching or interested, or if you have young people in your life who may be interested in learning about Black Men in White Coats, youth summits across the country, I'm going to reiterate this. Please visit blackmeninwhitecoats.org/summit. I want to thank our outstanding guests and physician mentors for joining us tonight. Nicole Mitchell, Dr. Ronald Hurst, Dr. Wanda, Dr. Morrell, Dr. Dale. We hope that each of you that watch this program are inspired to join their ranks someday. Please like and share this program. Thanks so much to Cedars-Sinai from all of us here at blackdoctor.org. And with that, I say good night.